Hi, Rick. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. Really just interested in picking your brains on the LEO technology a bit further. To start off, we at LEO, we always talk about what our technology is going to do for the cost of proton therapy. And we always focus on the reduction in equipment cost. But when we're out there and we're talking to customers, one thing they always talk to us about is the fact that the building cost, the surrounding infrastructure, is such a huge proportion of the cost. What do you think about that and the potential benefits that LEO can bring there?
Well, Stephen, first of all, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. And there are some real advantages with the LEO technology with respect to reduced building costs. A couple of examples would be, with the LEO technology, there is a fixed beam. So that means that there's only one primary beam path required for the treatment room. And if we were to compare that against traditional technologies that exist in the marketplace today, there are a minimum of two other areas that require the primary beam path shielding. And the primary beam path shielding is the vast majority of the shielding that is required in a treatment room. So if we reduce approximately 2/3 of the shielding, what we end up with is a reduced material cost, a reduced freight cost, a reduced labor cost. So that brings costs down on the overall project. But equally as important, by reducing those material costs, we're reducing the overall project timeline. And that's very important. The second real advantage to the LEO technology equipment is the amount of space that is required inside of the room, the inside dimensions. Ideally, with all medical equipment modalities, the objective is to get full machine functionality. The inside dimensions of the LEO technology equipment are significantly less for the LINAC as compared to the LINAC technology, but approximately 15 times less when compared to traditional proton rooms. So if we require a smaller room with the LEO technology, that means there are less shielding materials, but additionally, there are less finished materials inside of the room, and oftentimes less materials associated with the services, the mechanical, the electrical, plumbing. So if we think about that, with less materials, with less finishes, with less services related materials, ultimately we end up again with lower costs, and as importantly, a shorter overall construction or critical path time to complete the project.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And when you consider proton therapy rooms will typically generate in the order of $8 million in revenue per year, bringing that time down is just so enormously important for those customers. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Rick. And you talked a lot there about reduction in material. The world everywhere, it doesn't matter what industry you go and look in today, everybody struggles with supply chain, getting hold of raw materials, getting hold of components. How do you see that at the moment in the radiation shielding space? And do you see particularly now a real importance in reducing the amount of material required?
Yeah, in today's environment, both in our industry and most industries around the world, we are all dealing with those external risks: inflation, supply chain constraints on labor, particularly qualified labor. Freight is a very real one, particularly as it relates to radiation shielding, because there are a lot of materials, a lot of weight in which to ship. So those are all very real external risks that we didn't have to deal with to the extent that we do today 2 and 3 years ago. So if we bring that back to a project in the radiation therapy space, by reducing the materials, we're reducing the material exposure to those supply chains. But from a labor perspective, with fewer materials, we require fewer labor dollars. With fewer labor dollars, we require fewer teams on site. And that is a very real risk to find those qualified craftsmen in order to deliver both the shielding and the finishes, the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing that is required on these projects. So that's a way to deal with these uncontrollable risks and minimize them on projects such as this. And I think Leo Technology has that advantage because of the requirements with the equipment and what is needed on site.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, we've been out there, we've been talking to a lot of different customers, a lot of different people about our technology over the last few years. I think everybody's a little bit fed up of hearing me talk about the benefits of Leo. I've been doing it for so long now. But when you look at construction and you look at that overall project to bring this technology into the clinic, moving from a rotating beam to a fixed beam, people do sort of jump to that, the realization that we're going to save a lot of material. Are there any kind of other benefits that are less obvious that you see that come from moving from a rotating gantry to a fixed beam?
Yeah, there actually are a number of them. By utilizing within a cancer center a smaller room, we end up with a great degree more flexibility. So if we start with an existing cancer center that perhaps either wants to bring in technology or add to their technology, because of the space requirements being significantly less, there is a great deal more flexibility within those existing cancer centers to try and fit in that piece of equipment. Sometimes it may be as simple as a couple of offices that are given up, or a conference room. When that is compared to some of the traditional modalities that are out there, those kinds of options oftentimes are not available. There are times when centers want to look at expanding and go to satellites or perhaps a freestanding center. The fit and feasibility analysis associated with Leo technology makes that a whole lot more viable. Less space, less materials, less cost. There are many more facilities, traditional medical office buildings and commercial office buildings that become very viable solutions to setting up with the Leo technology. Another real advantage is that the Leo technology is a piece of medical equipment. Well, the shielding systems that are provided are modular. And because of the modular component of that, if the center decides to move the equipment, perhaps to the other side of the building, across town, maybe across the state or the country, those are very much options that exist with the Leo technology, because the equipment can be moved, but also the modular shielding system can be moved with it. Another real advantage to that is that in many countries, the modular shielding systems are considered capital equipment. And if we're talking about an after-tax facility, just like the medical equipment, the shielding equipment will receive those favorable tax benefits. So that's a real economic benefit to the Leo technology. And a really, really important one is we've talked about the reduced construction of what we call critical path times. It's all about when decision makers decide to move forward with the technology, how quickly can we get beam on? That's the goal, to meet the quality standards of the project, meet the regulatory requirements, and deliver that project as soon as possible. And the sooner we have beam on, the sooner patients are being treated, and the sooner revenue is being generated. And that's a real benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always interesting. You must have come across a lot of different hospitals where you go in, you install something, and then you come along in a few years' time and they think, well, I'd just like to move things around, actually, where the way that we did it before was not optimum, it wasn't ideal. I've certainly come across a number of customers that have changed their mind over the way that they'd like the department laying out. And we also see that as a massive advantage. And talking of kind of moving machines around and putting them in different places, a bit of an interesting one for you. with this real paradigm shift and this completely new way of thinking around radiation therapy and radiation protection, radiation shielding, what's the most interesting place that you could think that Leo Cancer Care could install technology today that maybe wasn't possible, wasn't an option previously?
Well, at the end of the day, we are all in this business to do our part to help with the patients, to battle this cancer. And from our perspective, from our end of the business, it's how can we increase the patient experience? If we think about where traditional radiation therapy centers are installed, most of them are on ground levels or in the basements of facilities. And that may not be the most pleasing experience to be treated for cancer. If we were able to take those cancer centers and move them up to the second, to the third, to the fourth floor, think about the changes for the patients if we've got natural sunlight. If the facility perhaps is located near a lake, near the ocean, has an urban scene, a wooded scene, just a very, very different experience for the patient. And with Leo technology, that's a viable option.